Jada Brooks moved to Columbus, Georgia, looking to start anew after enduring a difficult time in her life. At 28, she was fleeing a series of harmful relationships that had left her emotionally drained and scarred. The decision to move was driven by her urgent need to escape the chaos of her past and find stability to rebuild. Raised in a turbulent family environment, Jada's parents' volatile relationship created a household filled with constant arguments and insecurity. As a result, she often felt neglected, seeking validation in unhealthy places. By her teenage years, she had become involved in a series of toxic relationships, each more damaging than the last. These early experiences left deep emotional scars and a warped understanding of love and trust. Her most recent relationship was especially painful, marked by control and abuse that stripped her of her sense of self. When she finally found the courage to leave, she turned to the one place she hoped would offer her comfort: her sister Naomi's home in Columbus. Naomi Brooks, Jada's older sister by 5 years, also carried her own burdens. At 33, Naomi was a single mother to her 18-year-old son Marcus and worked long hours as a waitress at a local diner. Naomi's life revolved around her responsibilities, shaped by a difficult childhood and becoming a mother at a young age. Her focus was entirely on providing for Marcus, leaving little time or energy for anything else. When Jada arrived, there was a subtle shift in their home. Naomi, preoccupied with work and single parenthood, was initially relieved to have her sister nearby, though she remained unaware of the deeper tension beginning to build beneath the surface. While Jada tried to settle into her new life by taking a part-time job at a nearby store, she struggled to let go of the emotional baggage from her past. It was during this vulnerable period that Marcus began noticing his aunt in a way he never had before. Marcus, who had grown up without a father and was now nearing adulthood, found himself increasingly attracted to Jada. At first, his interest seemed innocent, a mix of curiosity and admiration for how she carried herself despite her obvious pain. But as he observed her closely, seeing her vulnerability and the way she tried to hide her hurt, his feelings shifted into something more intense and dangerous. He started to gaze at her when she wasn't looking, stealing glances at the curve of her neck or the way her clothes clung to her form. He became acutely aware of her presence, the lingering scent of her perfume in the air long after she left the room. These feelings confused and overwhelmed him, an intoxicating mix of desire and guilt. He knew his thoughts were wrong, but they filled a void he hadn't realized existed. Jada, still struggling from the scars of her past, began to sense Marcus's growing interest. At first, she brushed it off as harmless, the awkward attentions of a young man. But over time, she began to notice how his gaze lingered a bit too long and how he found excuses to be near her. She could feel the weight of his eyes on her and the tension in his presence. For a woman who had long felt unwanted and unloved, this attention was both alarming and oddly comforting. One evening, when Naomi was working late, Jada caught Marcus watching her from the doorway as she prepared for bed. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline, his heart racing, and instead of turning away in shame, he kept his gaze locked on hers, ignoring the voice in his head that told him to stop. Jada didn't speak, but the spark between them was undeniable. As days passed, their interactions became more charged. Marcus found ways to brush past her in the narrow hallways of the trailer, his touch lingering just a moment too long. Jada, despite knowing better, found herself responding to his subtle advances, small gestures like a hand resting on his shoulder, a shared glance that conveyed more than words could express. For Jada, these interactions were a dangerous game, a way to feel something beyond the numbness that had consumed her. For Marcus, it was a chance to feel desired, to feel like a man. Their relationship escalated rapidly. One night, while Naomi was working a double shift, Jada and Marcus found themselves alone in the house. The tension that had been building for weeks finally reached its breaking point. Marcus, emboldened by Jada's subtle encouragement, made the first move, leaning in to kiss her. Jada hesitated, her mind screaming for her to stop, but her body betrayed her, leaning into the kiss and craving the connection she had been missing. What followed was a blur of emotions and reckless abandon. They crossed a line that night, a line that could never be undone. Their affair began in earnest, a secret shared only between them, hidden from Naomi, who remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within her home. Jada knew it was wrong, knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't stop. Marcus, for his part, was intoxicated by the thrill of their secret relationship, feeling wanted by someone as broken and beautiful as Jada. But as their relationship deepened, the weight of their secret began to bear down on them. The guilt, the fear of being caught, and the realization of just how far they had fallen took its toll. What had begun as an attempt to fill the emptiness within them was quickly becoming something much darker, something that would eventually consume them both. The consequences of their actions were inevitable. As they continued down this dangerous path, they were hurtling toward a tragedy neither could foresee or prevent. By March 2023, 5 months after Jada and Marcus's relationship had crossed a critical line, the consequences began to unfold in unexpected ways. Jada found out she was pregnant, a discovery made one evening when she felt unwell and took a pregnancy test. Initially, she dismissed the possibility, attributing her symptoms to stress and exhaustion. But as weeks passed, the signs became impossible to ignore. When the test confirmed her worst fears, Jada was paralyzed by anxiety. She knew the pregnancy would soon be impossible to hide, and that it would reveal the truth about her relationship with Marcus. Despite the overwhelming fear, she kept the news to herself, torn between the reality of her situation and the need to maintain a sense of normalcy. She also didn't know how Marcus would react, uncertain about his own future and the stakes of their relationship. The strain of keeping such a significant secret began to take its toll on Jada. She withdrew emotionally from Marcus, though she continued to interact with him normally in front of Naomi, avoiding any situations that might raise suspicion. But the constant tension wore her down. In late March, the situation took an unexpected turn. Marcus, growing more suspicious of Jada's behavior, accidentally found the pregnancy test hidden in her room. He was shocked and terrified. Already struggling with the reality of their relationship, Marcus now faced the impending responsibility of fatherhood, something he was neither prepared for nor capable of handling. His fear quickly turned to panic, particularly at the thought of Naomi finding out. He understood that if the truth came out, it would destroy his relationship with Jada and devastate his mother, who had no idea what had been happening under her roof. Marcus's response was to distance himself from Jada, avoiding confrontation. The once intense relationship between them quickly unraveled. Consumed by fear and guilt, Marcus became withdrawn and irritable, no longer the attentive and affectionate partner he had once been. Jada, left feeling abandoned and alone, struggled with the change. By early April, the relationship had deteriorated to the point where they barely spoke. The pregnancy, once a private burden for Jada, was now a silent wedge driving them apart. Both knew their situation was unsustainable, but neither was willing to face the reality of what needed to be done. The tension in the household grew as Jada and Marcus avoided addressing the issue hanging over them. Naomi, still unaware, noticed the shift in their behavior, but attributed it to normal teenage mood swings and the stress of Jada's recent move. As the situation became impossible to ignore, Jada began considering her options more seriously. The pregnancy could no longer be hidden, and the pressure to make a decision was growing. But without Marcus's support and with no one else to turn to, Jada found herself paralyzed by indecision. The idea of facing the consequences alone terrified her, and she didn't know what the future held. The relationship that had briefly provided her with relief from her emotional pain was now the source of her deepest fears and regrets. Marcus, too, was struggling with his own demons, unable to reconcile his actions with the reality of the situation. Both were trapped in a cycle of fear, guilt, and confusion, with no clear path forward. By the end of April, the sense of an impending crisis had become overwhelming. Both Jada and Marcus knew something had to give, but neither was ready to face the potential consequences of taking action. The truth of their situation had shattered any illusions they had once held about their relationship, leaving them both facing an uncertain and frightening future. The revelation of Jada's pregnancy sent Marcus's anxiety into overdrive. The fear of impending fatherhood and the possible reaction of his mother, Naomi, drove him to drastic measures. Marcus carefully chose a remote location in a dense pine forest near the Chattahoochee River for the planned crime, a place he and Jada were familiar with from their secret meetings. The isolation and natural cover of the forest seemed like the perfect setting for his plan. On April 5th, 2023, Marcus arranged to meet Jada there under the pretense of a romantic gesture, hoping to resolve the tension between them. Jada, still emotionally invested in the relationship, agreed to the meeting, unaware of Marcus's true intentions. When Jada arrived at the forest clearing, Marcus confronted her. What began as a conversation quickly escalated into a violent confrontation. Marcus, who had been planning the act for weeks, was driven by fear, desperation, and an attempt to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. The situation turned violent, and Marcus carried out his premeditated plan to kill Jada in the secluded forest. After overpowering her, he dragged her body to a nearby riverbank, attempting to conceal it among the underbrush. The remote location, he believed, would help keep the body hidden, but his efforts to cover it up were flawed. After disposing of Jada's body, Marcus returned home, feeling a grim sense of relief, believing he had solved his immediate problems. But the act of violence marked a critical turning point in his life, and the complexity of the crime would soon unravel everything he thought he had resolved. Efforts to cover up the murder would soon be uncovered during the investigation. The remote location and the steps Marcus took to conceal the body would play a significant role in the investigation into Jada's disappearance. By mid-July 2023, Jada Brooks, aged 28, had vanished without a trace. On July 14th, Naomi realized that she hadn't seen or heard from Jada for 3 days. At first, Naomi thought Jada might have gone off to clear her mind or visit a friend, especially since Jada had been struggling emotionally after leaving a turbulent and abusive relationship. The silence was odd, but not immediately alarming. Naomi, who worked long hours as a waitress at a local diner, didn't always track Jada's whereabouts closely. However, when Jada missed her part-time shift at a nearby convenience store, Naomi's concern grew. Jada was not the type to miss work without notifying someone. Over the next 2 days, Naomi called and texted Jada repeatedly, and even reached out to some of her friends, but no one had heard from her. Each passing hour only heightened Naomi's worry. On July 16th, after returning from a late shift, Naomi decided that she could not wait any longer and reported Jada's disappearance to the Columbus Police Department. The next day, police began their investigation, with Detective Andre Lewis, a seasoned investigator with over 15 years of experience in missing persons cases, assigned to lead the inquiry. At 40, Lewis was known for his attention to detail and his ability to detect subtle inconsistencies in witness accounts. He started by interviewing Naomi, who gave a detailed description of the last time she saw Jada. Naomi explained that Jada had seemed somewhat distant, but there were no signs that she was planning to leave. Next, Detective Lewis questioned Marcus, Naomi's 18-year-old son. Marcus claimed not to know where Jada had gone, saying he had been busy with his own life, working part-time and spending time with friends. However, Detective Lewis noticed that Marcus seemed unusually nervous during the questioning. His answers were brief, and he avoided eye contact, prompting the detective to revisit Marcus's statements later in the investigation. As the inquiry progressed, the police conducted a thorough search of the areas surrounding Naomi's mobile home, combing the dense pine forests near the Chattahoochee River and searching along the riverbank. Despite their efforts, they found no trace of Jada. Meanwhile, Naomi, growing desperate, began putting up flyers around town and on social media, hoping someone would come forward with information. While the official search was underway, Marcus reached out to his best friend, TCK Davis, known as TK. TK, a 19-year-old who had known Marcus since childhood, was unaware of the gravity of the situation. When Marcus asked for help with something important, TK agreed to meet him in a secluded area near the forest. There, Marcus revealed the true reason for their meeting. He needed TK's help to move Jada's body, which he had hidden near the riverbank. At first, TK was shocked and hesitant, but Marcus manipulated him, appealing to their long-standing friendship and TK's loyalty. Marcus convinced him that helping was the only way to protect both of their futures. TK reluctantly agreed, and together they buried Jada's body deeper in the forest, in a location they hoped would remain undetected. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation. Detective Lewis expanded his inquiries, speaking with Jada's co-workers at the convenience store and some of her old friends. He also revisited Marcus, pressing him with more direct questions about his relationship with Jada. Marcus maintained that he had no knowledge of her disappearance, but his anxiety became increasingly obvious. As Naomi's worry turned to despair, the local community became involved. Volunteers joined the search efforts, and the case began receiving media attention. The police set up a tip line, hoping for leads. However, as days turned into weeks, no significant evidence emerged. By early August, Detective Lewis began to focus more intently on Marcus. He noted inconsistencies in Marcus's timeline and behavior during interviews. Despite Marcus's attempts to stay composed, it was clear to Lewis that he was hiding something. Meanwhile, TK, also interviewed, began to crack under the pressure. The stress of concealing such a dark secret was taking its toll, and he became increasingly paranoid about the possibility of the police discovering the truth. Eventually, the combination of the investigation's pressure and TK's growing guilt became too much for him to handle. On August 10th, TK approached the police with a confession, admitting his role in helping Marcus bury Jada's body. With the evidence in hand, the police arrested Marcus Brooks on charges related to Jada's disappearance and death. Naomi, devastated by the revelation that her son was involved in her sister's murder, was left to cope with the emotional aftermath. The case was far from over, but the truth had begun to surface. Detective Lewis, recognizing the importance of TK's testimony for Marcus's conviction, meticulously verified all the details. He focused on confirming the location TK mentioned. It was crucial to validate his statement and link it to other evidence. Upon checking the wooded area where TK and Marcus allegedly left the body, investigators found car tracks, shoe prints, and most importantly, several items of clothing matching what Jada had been wearing. Experts also found tissue particles and hair consistent with Jada's biological material. These discoveries provided strong evidence that Jada had indeed been there. However, TK's confession alone wasn't enough to guarantee a conviction. Investigators continued to gather a wide range of evidence to link Marcus directly to the crime. Lewis and his team analyzed surveillance footage from nearby neighborhoods and buildings. The cameras had captured Marcus near the area where Jada's belongings were found. This footage confirmed his presence in the area the night Jada disappeared. Additionally, more witnesses came forward, confirming that they had seen Marcus and Jada together in the days leading up to her disappearance. These statements strengthened the prosecution's case, showing that Marcus had both the motive and the opportunity to commit the crime. One witness reported hearing an argument between Marcus and Jada, which could have led to her disappearance. Investigators also scrutinized Marcus's financial transactions and phone calls. The analysis revealed that he had called the area where the tracks were found several times and made a large money transfer to an account later used to hire a lawyer. These transactions raised suspicions that Marcus was trying to hide his involvement. Gradually, the mounting evidence, coupled with TK's testimony, painted a clear picture linking Marcus to Jada's disappearance and death. The investigators prepared an indictment and referred the case to court. At trial, the prosecution presented a convincing case, including TK's testimony, forensic evidence, and witness statements, all clearly pointing to Marcus as responsible for Jada's murder. Marcus's defense lawyer tried to challenge the evidence, but much of it was irrefutable. At trial, Marcus sat silently, visibly depressed. His lawyers, understanding the complexity of the situation, focused on attempting to reduce his sentence, emphasizing his confession and cooperation with the investigation. However, none of these efforts changed the outcome of the trial. The court sentenced Marcus to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This decision left mixed feelings among those involved. Naomi, while comforted by the just verdict, was devastated by the loss of Jada and the betrayal by her son. While Marcus began serving his sentence, Naomi struggled to cope with the consequences of the tragedy and rebuild her life. She faced many challenges in her emotional and psychological recovery. Although the truth had come to light, Naomi's life was forever changed. She focused on finding comfort and support from her loved ones, hoping to regain peace and hope over time. Naomi decided not to visit Marcus in prison, believing that any contact would only prolong her pain and delay her healing. Instead, she concentrated on restoring her emotional well-being and bringing meaning and joy back into her life. Gradually, Naomi found solace in new hobbies, family support, and an active social life. She also began participating in activities to help victims of crime, finding purpose in aiding others who faced similar tragedies.